what's natural for us. Medical contact lenses is what we understand. When we get into the optical, I think most of us don't understand enough to know where to start. So I feel like finding a good base of starting. If you just wanted to dive into your optical, where do you think anybody would start? And I think that's a hard question for anybody to understand. So through my process of going through all this and working with doctors and doing practice management consultations, I feel like I've developed about an 8-pronged system of way you go through it. And the first half being the rules of optical, which those haven't changed over the years. The second half being the rules of retail. This is absolutely a retail business. We're putting medical devices in these frames, but this is a retail business, and as soon as the patient steps out into optical, they very quickly become a retail consumer.
Hello and welcome to the Crystal Podcast on iCode Media. Today I had a great conversation with my good friend, Dr. Alex Martin. And if you don't know Alex, you ought to. So there's a lot of people that think about their opticals and think about them deeply, but almost nobody has had the ability to really dive deep, both within independent practices, but also within industry, to figure out what does the data tell us about our practices, what does the data tell us about our optical, and how can we create a strategy within our optical that allows us to take actionable steps so that we can make the optical a better place for patients so we can deliver better care. So please enjoy our conversation. As always, be sure to subscribe to the podcast, write a review, share it with your friends, and support those who support us. The most common questions I get include, what ophthalmological codes or evaluation and management codes should I use? What ICD-10 codes do I need to bill with this CPT code? What CPT codes can be billed together and what can't? And my favorite, how do I manage a patient who has diabetes who comes in for a quote-unquote routine eye exam? These questions really highlight the confusion and uncertainty that serves as a daunting hurdle for providers, makes it more challenging for them to care for their patients and provide those patients with the best opportunity for a lifetime of ocular health and clear vision. That's why we built iCode Education for this specific purpose. Our mission is to provide optometrists with resources to help you understand disease states, revenue cycles, and billing and coding so that you can put that on autopilot and truly care for your patients. Check out iCodeEducation.com. That's EYECODE education.com. We've developed a premier billing and coding bundle that includes all of our billing and coding resources in one place. We also have a 10% discount code just for listeners of this podcast. Enter the coupon code EYECODEMEDIA22 at checkout. We'd love to work with you. Check out iCodeEducation.com. Hello, dedicated optometrists. Are you looking for a way to support your patient's vision and overall eye health? Let me introduce you to Vision Edge Pro, a visual performance supplement that stands out in our profession. Vision Edge Pro contains a balanced blend of mesozeaxanthine, lutein, and zeaxanthine in a 10-10-2 ratio. This combination has been scientifically shown to increase macular pigment density, which enhances visual performance, including contrast sensitivity and vision in glare situations. Additionally, Vision Edge Pro provides 300 milligrams of DHA and EPA, fulfilling the daily requirements for omega-3s as recognized by the leading health organizations. This ensures your patients receive the essential nutrients their eyes need for optimal health. Whether it's for everyday screen use, night driving, or enjoying the outdoors, Vision Edge Pro supports your patients in seeing their best. Recommend Vision Edge Pro for your patients today and help them achieve clearer, healthier vision. Contact your local MacuHealth representative for more details. Vision Edge Pro, because your patients deserve the best in eye health. Go to MacuHealth.com and use the coupon code PODCAST2024 at checkout for special discounts. So Alex, thanks for coming on and doing this. I appreciate it. I wanted to talk, so a couple of weeks ago, I had a conversation with Jennifer Stewart, and she was talking about her optical. And what I've been thinking about is how do we mechanize our optical better in our practices? So she really looks at her optical as a pillar. So similar to the way I talk about pillars in our practice with ocular disease. And obviously like the very foundational pillars that we discussed in iCode is optical or glasses and contact lenses. We sort of separate it out that way. One of the things that I was hoping that I could pick your brain about is how do we dive deeper into our opticals to first understand what that revenue generation machine is doing, and how do we know it's working well? And then second, how do we take an approach with our optical to ignite it or to kind of keep that machine running in today's day and age? So thanks for doing this. All right, so there's a lot in there. So tell me, what do I look at? Let me take a step back and think about like what drives you. Like when you think about your experience in understanding opticals and frames and lenses, how did you come to the game there? You've been doing that a long time.
Yeah, good place to maybe back up for a second. I would say in 2015, before I took my position negotiating frame contracts for independent eye care providers, i.e. Vision Source, my understanding of optical and optical management and practice management as it deals with optical is about the same as most eye doctors. I understood that a lens that I prescribed goes into the frames that I displayed, and that was about all I knew. But this is a retail business, and it's a big retail business, about $35 billion business in the United States. Hence, so many doctors wonder why is there so much competition out there for us in the market? Why are there so many big box retailers? Why are there so much online presence? And that's because there's $35 billion to grab out there. So for us as eye doctors, I think most of us, when we get out and we buy a practice and we start learning practice management for the first time, we do what's natural. What's natural for us, medical contact lenses, it's what we understand. When we get into the optical, I think most of us don't understand enough to know where to start. So I feel like finding a good base of starting, if you just wanted to dive into your optical, where do you think anybody would start? And I think that's a hard question for anybody to understand. So through my process of going through all this and working with doctors and doing practice management consultations, I feel like I've developed about an 8-pronged system of way you go through it. And the first half being the rules of optical, which those haven't changed over the years. The second half being the rules of retail. This is absolutely a retail business. We're putting medical devices in these frames, but this is a retail business, and as soon as the patient steps out into optical, they very quickly become a retail consumer.
Are you thinking about our opticals primarily now as retail businesses, like solely retail businesses?
Not solely retail business. There's the medical part of the lens that I feel like we have a lot of control over as eye doctors to be able to prescribe the device that goes into these frames. But yes, no question, this is a retail business that exists within your office, which is unlike pretty much any medical specialty that I know of.
That aspect of it makes it really challenging for other entities to wrap their arms around. So as an example, or what I say, medicalized entities, so like hospital systems or large providers of care have a really hard time with integrating an optical into that bigger conglomerate practice. And I think probably it's because of the lack of understanding of retail. And I think also because of that, we sort of gravitate to not thinking about it as a retail business. And as you pointed out, it's not purely a retail business, but I guess my question is, should we be thinking about it primarily as a retail business that happens to sell medical devices?
Then I would pose you a question as a doctor and a practice owner. Who do you compete against? You're competing against retailers.
Yeah, I mean that's the way that's my thought on it is like I've said this before, and I think I even said it on the last podcast. But when I go to my men's clother, I just went last week, and I had in my mind this idea of, well, we have a Christmas party tonight. I need a new shirt and a jacket, and so I go in, and that's what I'm thinking about. But John knows the stuff I like, and he knows that he's going to have me show this, and this is a great piece, and this is a great company, and he's going to tell me about the company, and he's going to see the stuff I feel or the colors that I'm gravitating toward. And a lot of times he's showing me stuff that I wouldn't necessarily look at. But my point in bringing that up is like that's not how I think about my optical, and I need to.
Right.
And so help me transition my mindset in the optical about like, all right, so in order for Chris to start thinking about his optical more as a retail business, the other thing that I have going against me is like we are in retail space right now. I would say it's sort of quasi retail where we are, but we're moving to a even less retail space in the future. So, we rarely, well, I'll say we never get people who are perusing by our office. Like if they're coming to our office, they are seeking us out. So that
Correct.
gives me a disadvantage, I think, in terms of some other retail. Like if you're thinking about my competitors being, you know, places in malls, places
correct.
in
It
strip
actually
malls.
sets you apart. But I say one of the most correct but offensive things I ever heard was from the CEO of Warby Parker that said, somebody asked him and go, do you feel guilty about, because they built a $600 million business. Now, again, out of a $35 billion industry, that's a small piece of the pie, but that's a pretty sizable company. And they asked him, do you feel guilty about taking business away from eye care providers? And he said, no, they had the first opportunity. We have the biggest advantage in retail that most retailers do not have to solve the problem of how do you get people in your store. They're already there. So what are you doing before they get to the office, when they get to the office, in that whole process? Because you have people there that are ready to solve a solution and ready to purchase generally. It's a
Yeah.
huge advantage, not a disadvantage. Okay, that we're not pulling people off the street. Generally, most doctors have enough patients in their office to have a very successful optical business, even without attracting in people off the street.
Right. And that's a distinct difference between a retail, a solely retail business. But it also means that some of those patients, if again, one of the challenges I see is some of the patients that are coming to us, in fact, the majority of patients in our practice are coming to us primarily. So this is where I think our practice slightly differs, but they're coming to us primarily because they have some other ocular disease that they're managing. And so while we may be doing a refraction on a very regular basis, like an annual refraction, they're seeing completely fine. Their glasses, we've sold them a great pair of glasses if they've purchased them from us. They're good quality. They're holding up well. And I bring that up because I think, all right, well, so how do we think about that when the patient gets out to the front of the house into the optical and like not think about it as like the prescription hasn't changed, but think about it more like John, my men's clother, where it's like, how do I get my staff to be like, hey, try this. This would look awesome on you. Oh, I know that this is the kind of stuff you like. Hey, Chris, put this on. Just see, it's so like this is the way that it feels. So like, again, I'm jumping a little bit more, but I need to think more like that. I need my staff to think more like that.
I like your example. I often like to use examples of people when they go shopping themselves. They're doing this already, and we'll get into this. I'll probably give a quick nod to this, but before you went shopping, and if you got a store that you love and you know that they're going to have stuff in there, but most people, 93% of people, actually go online to shop before they go in. What are we doing before a patient comes in to be ready? And I say it's an omni-channel solution. Do we have our optical inventory online for patients to shop before they enter? Did you prompt them? Usually what we'll do is about 3 days before they enter the office, we'll send a text going, hey, we have your insurance verified. Here are going to be your co-pays. We look forward to seeing you. And oh, by the way, if you'd like to browse our inventory, our optical inventory before you come in to start the shopping solution, we'll have these ready for you when you come in.
What's your take up on that? So how many patients come in? Because we do the same thing, and I don't know that we're as intentional or doing it as well, but what's your uptake on the number of patients that come in and they've already pre-selected frames? What is the percentage?
Yeah. So what percentage of patients are actually pre-selecting, or what
Yeah.
happens after they pre-select? Pre-selecting, and let's say if we see 20 some comprehensive exams a day, we'll have about 3 or 4 now. But we're also coaching up our patients that come in that have not pre-selected, and I'll know that coming in the room of going, did you pre-select? The front desk knows what to ask, text knows what to ask. The patients that are pre-selecting, and I haven't found those just to be my younger patients. I get it from younger all the way up to 70 years old. Once they pre-select, we have about a 90% capture rate in the office for those that pre-select.
Wow. So, and then what's the barrier when you feel pushback? So again, we use a system. I think we probably use the same system that you're using. What's the pushback from doctors when they don't want to use that system? What would be the counterpoint to why we wouldn't do that?
Of static frame board inventory and having your inventory ready before. What
Yeah.
is the counter? What is the counterpoint to
Yeah.
that?
What would be the objection for most doctors of sending a patient away to shop online in your practice?
Of their inventory. Yeah. I
Correct. Yeah.
say if you're not doing it with your inventory, guess what? They're probably doing it somewhere else. Are you going to allow someone else to shop or to allow them to control that shopping experience? Because just like most things that you do a couple of days before you go shopping, lots of times you're going to do an online search. You don't always want to purchase online, and especially with glasses. That's our frames. That's something you want to see and touch and feel. And also, generally, you have to, if you've got a prescription, you have to get your prescription updated. But good for us that that's something to see and touch and feel, that it's almost a disadvantage to order offline, which is becoming very popular in today's society,
What's the
as we all know.
percentage of people purchasing online for eyewear?
Right. Not exactly sure about the percent purchasing online. I quoted Warby Parker has built a $600 million business, but they've also built or found the need to build bricks and sticks, mortar places, not just because they couldn't sell online, because they got big enough that they could do this now. And they are finding it's much easier when people can see, touch, and feel that before they make the purchase, your return rates go down.
Yeah.
But what we do know is that in the retail space, stores have been closing by the number of tens of thousands over the past 10 years.
When you
And
say
it's
stores,
retail stores, just
me,
like your clothing store.
correct.
Um, if you kind of think of who has survived what they call the retail apocalypse of 2017, where massive amounts of stores are closing, then enter COVID. And what happens during COVID? Well, more of the same. The stores that are surviving are those that are setting up omni-channel experiences, shop online, buy in store, shop in store, buy online, whatever you'd like to do. So getting back to the example of your clothing store, I don't think you're the person that's going to probably shop before you go in there. You're going to go in there, but what your clothing store understands is the brand strategy. They have brands that you've associated with that when you go in
Totally.
there, yes, they have inventory management. Do they have it in the store when you come in so that you can purchase it there? Not always, but you try to satisfy most of those. Um, they do assortment planning. So which one of the brands are they going to place out there? Which shirts, which jackets, which pants? So they come up with an assortment that they feel will appeal to most of us. Pricing then becomes part of this equation as well too. Then we move into all the rules of retail when you went in there. How are they merchandising this stuff? What was the store layout? How much customer experience did you get when you go inside that? And I've already heard from you. I can walk in there, I can kind of take a look around, I could come out with this. They know me now. That is an experience that you went through for your clothes shopping, I would assume, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yep. Are we providing those same level of experiences with our eyewear delivery model, how we deliver eyewear? And I would contest that most independent eye care providers are providing a very high level of eye care experience. Who gives a better eye exam than an independent eye care provider? When's the last time you've heard a patient say, boy, that's the best eye exam I've ever had? Probably the
Yeah.
last day you
Never.
were in
They never
clinic.
tell me that.
No, the best eye care.
I know. I'm just kidding.
So,
I'm
yeah,
just
yeah,
kidding.
yeah. We all hear it all the time. When's
We
the
hear it
last
all the
time a
time.
patient told you, hey, Chris, this is the best delivery of eyewear I've ever
Right.
had in my life?
Right.
Doesn't
Well, and it's
happen.
complicated. So that's the other challenge that we have, and I want to pick your brain because I actually want to get into kind of some of the analysis that you do, but it's complicated. Like that's the other part of it is like how do we get to the point where when a patient selects a pair of frames and lenses, it's as simple as tapping your credit card or your phone on the credit card processing machine and you're moving on. Well, it's not like that because now I got to, the way that it is, I got to sell that same pair of frame and lenses in our office 3 different ways: one for cash, one for managed vision care A, one for managed vision care B. And it's even worse. It's even more complicated if you take managed vision care plan C through Z as well, right? Because I got to sell it 26 different ways instead of one. So it's not like buying a shirt. It's not like buying a pair of pants. So there's that aspect of it too that is weird.
It is weird, and I don't know that there is a simple solution that we've mastered of going, hey, let's do this, and it's a tap or swipe and you're done situation. What you need to do is be ready for the patient when they come in. So a lot of prep work that you're doing. So if your team has to sit down there and figure out their managed vision care benefits while they're sitting at the table with them, why don't you do it before they come in?
Yeah, we use our virtual assistant to do that. That's great.
Yeah. Why not have a lot of these solutions set up? And we first started doing that with my staff. They go, wow, that's going to take a lot of time. I'm like, well, would you rather take that time in front of the patient or before they enter? And they go, and after a couple of days of doing it and getting caught up, it's all automatically done. So that becomes simpler, easier. You're telling the patient that you're ready to see him, we're prepared, and we can provide you the easiest, fastest, quickest solution. And by the way, we feel like we can do it better than anybody else out there.
So, okay. So the first thing that you walk into in a practice, like, is there something that naturally you say, like, this is the biggest mistake that practices make when they approach their optical? What do you find?
In the optical dispensary itself, usually not updating it. This is, we'll go spend $80,000 on the Optos in the blink of it, and rightfully so. Boy, that's a valuable piece of equipment in my examination. A lot of these equipment purchases that we make very quickly that serve X percentage of our practice, here's something that serves 44% of our gross revenue. Why would you not update your optical? Merchandising, that's kind of part of the retail sales trick, or not, I wouldn't say tricks of this, but it's a piece of that.
No, tricks are fine. I mean, it's a strategy, right? It's
right.
It's not that you're being strategic in a cynical way. It's that, I always talk about this. It's like there's sort of these ideas when I talk about like things like business made simple or story brand. It's like you're trying to get beyond the patient's analytical brain, not to do the wrong thing for them. Because you don't want to, and obviously you have to have good intent, but you're trying to show them, like, get beyond that so that they can do what's best for them. You know what I mean? And so that's what you're trying to do with merchandising is like, how do we merchandise so that our patients can do what is in their best interest, as opposed to like could be confused and analytical where they're going to make bad decisions, right? That's what you're trying to guide them on. So I don't look at it like strategic. I don't think those words are bad. I think they can come off bad, but that's not the point.
I mean, if you're designing an office from scratch, I want it to come open. I want your decompression zone, which is right where you enter the office. I want you to be able to take everything in. I want you to interest them. I want you to intrigue them. But most of us aren't ready to redesign a whole office. So what you can do is take a look at your optical, and does it just obey the simple principles of merchandising? Is your lighting correct? Do you have very cool light faced on your frames to highlight the color, but not over a patient where they're trying it out, because you want warmer light where they're trying things on to make their face look softer and it look more attractive? Are your displays set up? I often see the very famous, I call them the row of pegs, where you've got about 14 frames in a row and about 6 rows, and it's very confusing for an eye. We all studied saccades and pursuits. How easy is it to look at 86 frames in a row of 14 over 6 and tell one frame from the other?
It's not easy.
It's not easy.
Yeah.
A lot of practices I'll see, you couldn't tell the way they have their frames displayed. Is it a $5 frame or is it a $500 frame? You're not. A lot of people don't use what we call branding and wayfinding in retail merchandising to tell the story of a store. So when you went into your menswear store, how did you know where to go?
How did I know where to go?
Yeah, what clues did you look for in there? That's
interesting. Yeah, so I would look at like, okay, well, what first thing I would think is like, what type of shirt and jacket am I looking for? Mm-hmm. When I've been there before, where does John keep those, right? And so there's this natural pattern and so that's kind of how I would maneuver through the store.
Right.
typically I would, yeah. So those would be the things I'd
So
think
in
right away.
opticals, I feel like most people have above their fixtures a lot of very valuable space to be able to tell a story of wayfinding. Where do I go? Are these men's? Are these women's? Are these unisex? Are they kids? Is this sports? Using that space up there to help patients be able to browse their optical without any assistance from your staff. Can people shop your inventory, or is it just randomly laid out there? Then you kind of get in specifics like using shelving and having 3, 4, 5 frames displayed in together, not a row of 14. Are they grouped together? Do you have some POP beside them? For an example with Oakley, do you have a nice little sports display there? Or for a frame like Tom Ford, there's plenty of POP for people to say, hey, there's Tom Ford. You've got an appropriate model in there. Are these men's? Are these women's? To be able to tell the story without your staff being there to tell the story to them.
Okay. All right. So then if I were going to look at, like, let's say, I want to kind of just ask you questions. Again, I don't know wherever we go with this, but if I had let's say if I had 1,000 frames in the office, maybe it's too high for the average. Maybe we say have about 500 frames in the office. You tell me what's normal when you see this, but let's say there's 500 frames. How many should I display? Like, how many frames should be available for looking at, and how many should I keep underneath, just for simplicity's sake, to
Right.
drive eyes to where they should go?
Right. 0 underneath. We'll start off like that. If you can't see it, you can't sell it. So I like to have the whole inventory up there. 500 frames would mean that they are turning those 2.5 times a year. So they're selling about 1,250 frames a year. So each one of their brands is turning 2.5 times. That kind of tells you the number. Take the number of frames that you've sold in the past year, divide it by 2.5, and that gives you the appropriate inventory you should have.
Yeah. How many people have too high of an inventory?
Most practitioners have
Yeah.
not only too high, but they have too high in the lower retail prices. There's some pretty simple tools that you can take to evaluate. So how do you evaluate your brand strategy? Well, you lay them out, and let's take a look at the retail price categories your brands lie in, and then let's put them in segments. Are they sport? Are they fashion? Are they luxury? Are they lifestyle frames? And take a look and see how you've done. But I see most people very overcrowded in the 151 to 220 retail space because they're very easy to sell, low cost, especially in managed vision care. So somebody might go, well, gosh, we're selling a bunch of these, but you're not making very much profit on those as well too. And then you get that space very overcrowded with 10 brands in that retail
Right.
in that retail price point. Hard to make a decision with 10. I feel like most practices need 20 to 25 total brands.
20 to 25 brands. And
Brands.
and then how deep do you need to show those brands?
Depending on how many frames you sell.
Yeah.
So if you're a smaller practice and you don't need 1,000 frames because you're not selling 1,000 in a year, you really don't, you need to do it with 500.
Yeah.
I partnered in a warm start where we started out with 377 frames and 13, 14 brands. As the practice over the past 2 years has started to grow, we started increasing the number of brands, and we can go deeper in the brands that are selling. So which ones do you need to go deeper on? Now you need to take a look at your turn rates. How often is that brand turning for you? And the ones that are turning higher, you need to go deeper.
Yeah. So okay, let's say you come into a practice and to your point, you have too many frames, too much selection, and too much in the middle. Well, choose, because 1,000 is easy, is a relatively easy number for me to wrap my mind around, and it's easy, kind of easy math. So if we had 1,000 frames on the board, that would mean you'd be selling 2,500 frames, right?
A year.
But let's say that you're not. Okay, let's say that you're selling 1,000 frames a year, or worse, let's say you're selling 800 frames a year. How do you right that ship? What's the first thing you have those doctors do to clean it up?
First, I go, hey, let's fill out a brand map and take a look at your retail prices. Let's see if the brands that you're carrying are actually making sense for the patient demographic that you're serving. And most of us have to serve all demographics. You need a frame brand in every price point, but are you way overloaded in the lower cost? And most people are. And on top of that, they're very underweighted in premium and luxury. And most eye care or most doctors will go, hey, I'm providing premium and luxury eye care service. So why don't you parallel that with your eyewear delivery model or the frames that you're providing?
Right.
And I found most people think they are. They've got in their head maybe a specific brand they have on their board, but when they lay it all out on a brand map, they see very quickly, they go, oh, wow, I didn't realize the message I was conveying to my patients.
CooperVision and the AOA have joined forces in a groundbreaking initiative to transform how optometrists treat children with myopia. The Myopia Collective aims to unite our profession and its allies to challenge the status quo and elevate the standard of care for children with myopia. Everyone is invited to become a member of the collective. By joining, you pledge to act in slowing childhood myopia progression. Membership includes regular updates and information about the collective's efforts, access to educational opportunities and resources, and insights from the ambassador optometrists who advocate for community policy and changes supporting the collective's mission. Click the link in the show notes to join the collective today. We've been partnering with EssilorLuxottica 360 for a while now, and it helps us in 3 areas. First, they use social media campaigns to highlight products that we believe in and prescribe to our patients, and they deliver those patients back to our practice. Second, EssilorLuxottica 360 enhances our patient experience through staff training tools that help us simplify and streamline the way we communicate about our products and services. Lastly, but for my practice most importantly, it helps us make good business decisions related to our optical offerings. We will systematically and objectively analyze what our patients are purchasing and what they like, and removing products that our patients are not really using or not really drawn to. This, along with additional rebates and immediate savings, helps us continue to deliver high-quality products and services to our patients and keeps our practice resilient. Check out EssilorLuxottica 360 for yourself by visiting EssilorLuxottica360.com.
Yeah. Well, and so that's the other challenge. So what I've realized in our practice is that we will not compete with the big box and the commonplace retailers on the lens options. So what we've done, and maybe this is the wrong way, but one of the things that has happened is we largely use very premium lenses, which means even if we could compare apples to apples on the frames, which we actually generally we have you've done an analysis of, as you could tell me if I'm wrong, but we do have quite a bit, or historically we've had a lot of things in the higher in the more premium categories, but over the last 10 years we've tried to fill in with lesser value. So we've tried to scale back a little bit more to be more things to more people.
Right.
And what I'm wondering about is, because we've decided we will not try to compete with lower dollar options on the lenses, we will never be able to compete on a complete pair, because even if we give options for frames that are lower dollar, we won't even try to compete on the lenses because we want to provide a better visual experience. So what do we do with that information?
Good point. And I feel in my practice, here's what I do. For the lens options, I take the same philosophy as you. I have maybe a 3-tiered lens system, and let's talk specifically on progressives. For single vision, it might be a regular single vision versus iZen, which is higher quality. But yeah, I'm not selling rock bottom progressive lenses to compete with them. You don't want to. This is a medical device that I take very serious, and we're going to have these conversations with the patients in the exam room, make the handoff with our opticians in the exam room, because it's still medical. So we keep that very medical. If you want to leave us and go for a very inexpensive lens, this is what you're going to get when you leave. But usually if you have those honest conversations, most patients are going to stay with you. For frames, you do have to have, I feel like, a wide variety. And it's not that I've got 2 neighbors that live beside me. Both of them are patients of mine. One of those just does not see the value of eyewear, does not want to spend any money. Not that he can't. I think he very easily could. And I've got another one that only likes to buy luxury. So it's not even in the demographic you serve. Some people just value things differently. I
Correct.
can easily convince my neighbor that doesn't want to spend a lot on frames. He's happy with a more generic frame, that he does need a high quality lens. And we have that discussion because that's a medical decision. The frame is actually the part of the retail customer decision that they're making. It's a shopping experience.
Pretend I'm the patient, and I feel like you must do this really well. How would you describe why your lenses are better than, so say I wear a progressive, 43 years old, I wear a progressive. Why are your lenses better, Alex, than what I can get in the big box retailer less than a mile away?
When we talk about designs, and specifically when I go into how a digital progressive is designed or a digital single vision lens, that's why I like to use Eyezen lenses. And this is not a plug for Essilor. It's a great lens for single vision people. It has blue light built into it automatically. These are the features that people are already looking for. They know no glare. They know blue light. They don't necessarily understand poly versus plastic versus Trivex. That's where I have to give my experience as a doctor of what I am prescribing. But we prescribe the lenses that they have. And if you're going to take your prescription out, you need to sit down with my optical team, because they're going to tell you they're likely not going to honor what the doctor has prescribed if you go somewhere else to get these filled.
And you will say, so what I'm trying to get you to do is I want to hear, like, don't tell me what you say, but tell me what you say. Like, tell me, like, pretend I'm the patient. Pretend I'm the patient. What does it sound like to me? Don't tell me I would generally talk about this and I would generally talk about that.
Right.
I think it's really helpful for providers to listen to other people who
Gotcha.
do it well and mirror that. So, and by the way, what you just did is infinitely hard to get providers to actually say, like, this is what I tell a patient. Hey, Alex, great news. I've got a new prescription for you. Blah, 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 blah. That's really hard to get doctors to role model, but it's so valuable when I can get people to do it. So what does it sound like?
Yep. So, hey, Dr. Wolfe, thanks for coming in today. We've just finished up your exam. Before I have my optical staff to come in, I want to review some of your findings we've had in your exam today. I know you do a lot of computer work in your time in your consulting business. That's why we're going to prescribe any lens that we have in here is going to have no glare and blue light protection, because I know you have a lot of screen time. I know you and your family spend a lot of time, because we've known each other for a long time, out on the lake. I've got a separate prescription for polarized sunglasses as well too, because when you're on the lake, polarization is really important. We'll consider transition on your regular pair, but polarization for your weekend trips is not going to be a substitute for that. So we can look at putting transitions on your regular pair so you can get that coverage of blue light, not only blue light, but sun protection outside as well too. And then we're also going to prescribe you a pair of computer glasses, because I know you do a lot of screen time. And the number one complaint I get from patients that wearing progressives is when they're on the computer, they have to tilt their head back to see up close. So computer glasses help correct you for intermediate or around computer screen length, and for up close as well too. So those are 3 different computers. I'm going to have my optical assistant come in. When they come in, we're going to review that with them as well too, and then they can help you put those into any frame that you select.
Okay.
So that
Thanks.
Go
ahead.
We've gone over the medical reasons I feel like you need to be in these lenses. I've taken it out of a retail conversation. These are just not lenses that we're trying to sell you. These are lenses I'm prescribing for you.
How many doctors do what you just did that you encounter? How many of us do that well?
Ones with high capture rates
Yeah.
do it very well. And I'm not seeing a lot of high capture rates right now. And on top of that, I've got an accountant that has about 70 optometric practices across the country. He was looking at our capture rate in the mid 60s. We hit 70 one month. He goes, boy, that's really good for 2024. I'm seeing, and I said, what, about 50 to 55%? Just in the quotations I give, he goes, no, I'm seeing more like in the 40s, and that number's headed down right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. I mean, all the data that I've seen is that capture rates are low, and it just makes me ponder how do you turn the ship around?
Right. When people are advertising on TV that you can get a frame and lens for $99, they're trying to make the purchase of glasses ubiquitous. Our progressives are the same. You absolutely have to differentiate that. And I feel like lenses being a medical device, it is the doctor's responsibility to do that, not the
Interesting.
staff's.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so then, all right, let's go back to the optical again, because I want to think about. Sorry, we departed from that, but so strategy. You've laid this out on a brand map, and you say, listen, we've got way too many frames for how much turn rate we have. It's confusing to patients. We're not putting out the brands that we have. And by the way, I observed last time I was in, because I've been thinking about this now for quite a while. Well, for a long time, actually. You and I have discussed it, but and I use my men's clother as an example. You say 20 to 25 brands, but I would be surprised if he's got 20 to 25 brands. I mean, I bet he might, but I bet it's 10, like 10 core brands, like core brands in that shop. So,
And correct. And he's a specialty store catering just to men.
Correct.
But within those brands, they cover jackets, pants,
Yep.
shirts, ties, socks. So it's a little bit different for a specialty menswear store.
Okay, that's fair. All right, so we lay this out, and let's say you've determined that you've got 1,000 frames on your board, but you're only turning 800 a year, right? So you're only selling 800 frames total a year. And we put this out on a frame
sold for totally a year. I'll bet you're doing about 800,000 in gross revenue. There's kind of a number I have often seen for about every $100,000 in gross revenue, people are selling about 100 frames.
That's interesting.
And you want that number to be higher than your gross revenue there, but sorry.
Wait, so say that again. You want to sell more frames than your gross revenue.
So if your gross revenue is 800,000, I would like to see you selling about 1,000 frames. That way I know your capture rate is more into the 60s, not 50s or below.
Or you're selling higher dollar frames.
Correct. You can do that too.
Yeah. Okay, so all right, so we've laid this all out. We've got our brand map. We say we got to get rid of, like, maybe you're at, if 20 to 25 is the good number, how do you then identify which brands you're going to get rid of? And within that, and then how do you get rid of them?
Identifying is probably easier than getting rid of them. So when you take a look at some of these lower price ranges where people are, I often see practices with 30 to 40 brands, mature practices. The worst I've seen is 78 brands, bunched up with about 20 into a lower retail price. How do you make a decision? Like you just said, if you went in and all of a sudden your men's clother now went from 10 brands to 30 brands, is it going to be easier for you to shop or harder for you to shop? It's going to be.
Well, if I care
harder,
about the
more
brands, it would be harder for sure. But like what I notice is when I go in there, there'll be a new brand. Like I have all the kind of normal brands I'm used to having him have. I've gotten used to that. And then every now and then, I'll walk in and it's like, oh, that's kind of a cool brand. Like the shirts I bought were from a brand I had never bought before. Right. But they were affiliated with brands I was already used to, right?
Correct.
In a store I was already used to. So he'll play with that.
Right. In ours, we're covering a little bit wider. They're probably a little bit, all the brands that you're seeing in those stores, a specialty store, probably pretty close in price. We have to have a little bit bigger differential. So once you've identified and you take a look at going, boy, we have a lot of brands, and I will, with about 99% certainty, say you're going to be over branded in the lower price points. Let's get rid of the ones that are least profitable, harder to inventory, to keep in your practice. You want your staff doing the least amount of work when they're dealing with frames in that price range, and we can narrow those down. Then we can make better offerings, because usually people are underserved in premium and luxury. So how do you get them off? Well, you can't just call the vendor and say, I'm tired of these, take them back. It usually doesn't happen. You really have to develop a strategy of how you're going to get rid of them. I say don't get too attached to making a lot of profit. You're trying to get those down to make more profit somewhere else. Sell them off. Put them on a package frame and lens board. We did that for when I've learned all that I've learned. I remember it took me a year or two to make total changes in my optical dispensary, in my brand strategy. You've got to be able to sell those down, offering maybe some specials with people that have got managed vision care, people that have contacts and want a backup pair. At one time, you could get a package frame and lens of a pretty nice frame, less expensive than the frame probably retailed for when I was selling it. You've got to get creative. One thing to do is, it's a little sneaky. You wouldn't want to tell a rep that, hey, we're going to get rid of your brand, but let's take a look at the ones that have sold the best. We've got 20 left on the board. And in the past year, we've sold 10 very successfully. Let's take 10 of those back and get 10 of the best sellers, maybe in a different color, to be able to try to go through those a little bit quicker. But you've got to sell them down. And you've got to be disciplined. You can't let the rep come back in. They'll want to fill you back up. Hey, let me try this. Again, you've identified you've got too much competition here. We're not making as much profitability. We need to clear it out. We need to stick to it. And that's going to take about 6 months to do.
Can you be specific when you had to do that? What was the best? Do you remember maybe it wasn't the best, but one of the best strategies that you had? You said maybe I got the frame down to a price where the frame and lenses were less expensive than the frame would have been. Right. What was the marketing on that, and how did you approach patients with it? What was your strategy?
Yeah. So that's a self-pay, obviously. It's not going to be with managed vision care. Very attractive to contact lens patients that are often resistant to updating their eyewear, although there's a need to do. So we could go start the conversation. Hey, we've got some package frame and lenses out there because we know we're going to use your insurance for contact lens purchase because you need a new backup. And we would emphasize the need to have a good backup because lots of them would not have that. Plus, it was a good strategy for a save to sell patient going, I really want to go out and get a very inexpensive pair of glasses out there, and go, well, hey, we can kind of go off the page and take a look at these. We can get you a higher quality frame for a lower price because we know we're trying to get rid of that brand, and the patient's happy.
Mm-hmm. And you tell the patients that. You tell them you're moving. Do you actually treat it like a clearance rack, or do you...
Or we just go, we're not going to be carrying this brand after we sell through, so we're trying to, patients are very used to that. They come in and go, hey, where's the sales rack? Where's the 50% off rack? Clothing stores or stores like that have to do that seasonally, which we do not have to. They have to go through their fall, spring, winter, summer lines. For us, it's more when we make a brand decision to terminate a brand and maybe acquisition a new brand. So it's not quite as often we have to do that, but that's part of the inventory management of knowing what you've got to do and then sticking with that and being willing to accept lower profitability to make a better brand strategy.
Right. Well, and I mean, if it's not moving, I mean, that's the thing that I think about a lot. Like, actually take a step back and think how much money, and obviously, like, doctors do this with widgets as well that they put in their practice. I mean, how many people do you know buy? It's like 75%, but how many people buy a device, a diagnostic device, or a treatment device? Those actually are like way underutilized. But if you look at like a diagnostic, like they buy it, they think it's going to be great, and then it sits in the corner. Like, I think like our opticals are doing the same thing, right? We buy the frame.
Right.
We're never going to sell that frame. We may never sell that frame. And how much money do we actually have sitting on that, on that frame board that we will never make back?
A good friend of ours that I do some lectures with, Aaron Werner, often says brands have to pay rent, and the rent they pay is their turn rate on your boards.
Yeah.
You have to think of it as every little space on your optical is an apartment that is there, and how much rent are you getting for that apartment space?
Is there a square footage? So when you think about square footage in an optical, I know that you're talking about like you're decluttering, but what if you did turn, 2,500 frames a year and you had 1,000, but your square footage was really tiny? How would you merchandise those? Would it change your strategy with merchandising?
With a really big practice that could theoretically hold 18, they had 1,600 frames. And you looked at their turn rate, and they could easily support that. Their turn rate was 3x, 4x, maybe 5x. So they go, hey, well, we can easily sustain having 1,600 frames. I was like, okay, how many can you display? And the answer was 1,200. I said, so at any time you've got 400 frames down below or in the back or stored somewhere, they're not out for display. Let's take a look at those frames without doing that. And I don't think she had the data on it, but how many times do you think you're turning those 400 frames? Not very often. If you can't see them, you can't sell them. It's tough to do. I suggested that they get down to 1,000 frames, even though they're going to have a high turn rate on that because number one, 1,600 then becomes almost paralysis of analysis. You can
Yeah.
have too many because at the end of the day, they might be seeing a high volume of patients, but how many patients are coming up for that same optical experience? You're only selling to one patient at a time. But I suggested they get down to 1,000, and she agreed. And then I asked her a couple months later, and she goes, "Well, I settled on 1,200." I said, "So you've got 200 down below?" She goes, "No, I expanded my optical." So
Yeah, that's the other answer. So yeah, I mean, I think what's really interesting is, yeah, so yesterday, so we've been working on this process in our practice now actively, and so we've been taking some of the strategies that you talk about in your workshops and with your courses, and what was really funny to me is she's a great optician. She's been with us for a long time. I love her. I love her to death. But I was kind of we haven't pulled back on our brands yet, but that was the next step. It's like, okay, now we've identified our big sellers, our sellers, we brand mapped, and we're going to need to pull back on brands because we're over indexed. We have too many frames for the number of frames that we sell. And so I said that comment to her, and so what she said was she observed that, yeah, but we had a patient in the other day that her and her husband came in and they just said they've been 5 different places in Omaha, and we had by far the best selection. And do you know what I asked her?
what?
I said, did they buy glasses? Do you know what the answer was?
No.
The answer was, well, we have all the measurements, and they're going to call us back. So it's like I mean, now to my point, like to your point, and you know, but that part of it is like, how do we get our teams on board with it? And a lot of it is like, you know, it's not an indictment of her. She's done a good job in the optical, but she is over-indexing us, right?
I faced this problem a lot when I first started speaking on these subjects and on these titles, and you'd look at staff, and they just kind of would cringe. It's personal to them. They feel like you're taking something away. What I feel like when you're starting to make these changes is you need to absolutely get your staff on board, and what you're trying to tell them, and your job as owner of the practice, president of the company, is to lay out a vision, correct? So
Yep.
what are we trying to really accomplish? Is it to have the most brands and most selection that really confuse people, or is it to provide a better customer experience, which is a hill everybody can climb? I don't think there's one staff member in any independent doctor's office that would not get on board with going, hey, we're going to provide our patients a better shopping experience. And they go, okay, how do we do that? Well, we've got too many brands, and the reason we've got too many, what the problem with too many brands is it becomes overwhelming for patients. It's hard to make a decision. It's creating a lot of time and effort for you to inventory this many brands. It's confusing when you're looking at it. It's hard to keep them on the board. You're spending a lot of time and effort trying to manage inventory, not patient facing. We can provide a better customer experience if we adopt these strategies and get them on board that way. Nobody wants to hear, doctor or staff, that you're taking something away from me. But I think we can all get on board of going, let's create a better experience for our eyewear delivery models.
Well, I think I'm going to be respectful of your time, Alex. I think this was a great conversation from my perspective and super helpful. You've got some consulting options for people, and you also have some online courses for them to kind of dig deeper into what you've discussed here today. How can people find it? And if people want to reach out directly to you, how do they do that?
Well, they can email me directly at martini@gmail.com. That's easy to do. But more importantly, as I was developing all this and got to know you a little well, I wanted to take this out so that other people, this coursework that I created, I go, boy, I want to provide that to all independent eye care providers. And luckily you had a platform that I could use, so you can find it within iCode Education now, as I want to thank you for giving me a platform to provide this. But we've got a great introductory video that kind of goes over some of the things that we discussed today, but it's an 8-segment course that you could do at your own time, that your staff could do. But I will highly suggest for doctors, don't let this just be something your staff does. either your office manager or you need to go through it as well too and understand it if you're the managing partner in your in your office and responsible for financial decisions.
Well, as a plug, what I think has been really helpful in the way we've done it within our teams, within our practices, we have a weekly meeting. And one of our strategies is to collectively take this, and the way you broke it down was so smart, is that every video is 6 to 10 minutes, so I can actually have a 6 to 10 minute kind of digestible piece of information that, as collectively, if we have a 30-minute meeting, we can go over that topic, we can discuss how that topic applies to the rest of the optical, we can really wrap our hands around it collectively. So everybody check out Alex's course on iCodeEducation.com. It's called Optical Business Strategies, and if you want more help and more hand-holding from Alex, please reach out to him. We have that contact information through iCode.
Right.
Thanks, Alex, for being on.
If I could say one more thing
please,
before
go
we
ahead.
leave, is number one, I wanted to make this simple. It cannot be hard to do. I've seen 1,000 practice management opportunities, and sometimes they're difficult to implement because we don't have IT departments. You can go through these first part of the strategies with a crayon and a piece of paper. It's easy to apply. I hope you and your staff found that as well too, that there's not difficult steps you have to take. You just have to take the steps.
You just have to do it. Yeah. Thanks, Alex. Appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me, Chris. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Hey, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and our YouTube channel, both linked in the show notes. Now, here's something exciting. We're giving away a 1-year subscription to Comprehensive Optometry Simplified. All you have to do is leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, take a screenshot, and email it to me at questions@iCodeEducation.com. We'll put that in the show notes as well. We'll be selecting a winner on December 15th, so don't miss your chance to get access to this valuable resource. Thanks again for listening. I can't wait to see your reviews.